I mean, I remember the first summary judgment that I gave the partner at the firm. It might as well have been bleeding red. But the point was, first of all, I knew that was going to happen. But secondly, the next one bled a little less. And it's because you can't get like self-conscious that, God, I'm a bad lawyer. No, you're not.
No.
You're a baby.
Yep.
That is what it is.
When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast. Thank you for tuning into episode 50 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. My guest today is one of our very own Snellings Law attorneys, Christian Albuquerque. Christian was born to Brazilian immigrant parents and is a dual citizen who was raised in Dallas, Texas, where he and his wife reside today with their newborn daughter. He earned his undergraduate degree in International Security Studies and Portuguese from the University of Oklahoma, and then attended Texas A&M University School of Law in Fort Worth, Texas. While in law school, Christian was a member of the Latin American Law Student Association and clerked at a personal injury firm, a business firm, and at Parkland Hospital. He joined our Snellings Law team in 2022, and we have been so lucky to have him aboard. Christian, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you. I'm, to be clear, I like my law school. I loved my experience, but I'm a proud Sooner. So let's just get that out of the way. I'm not going to disparage anyone else, but that's how we're starting.
All right. And we do have another Aggie in the law firm, and I will attest that there are daily fights pretty much. Okay.
There are indeed.
All right. So you and I were talking the other day about law school, about preparing to go to law school, being in law school, and then post-law school. And I said, you know what? Let's just go talk about this in front of the microphones.
Yeah.
So tell me this. When did you first want to become a lawyer?
Actively, it was probably late in undergraduate. Now, the idea of that, like if you were to have asked me in 7th grade, what do you want to do? That would have been probably one of 3 things. So it was kind of always there. Mm-hmm. But if it was a purposeful, like I've got a plan to do this thing, it wasn't until probably junior year of college.
And what kind of led you down that path? At what point were you just like, hey, this is what I actually want to do. I want to be a lawyer.
So I really had no idea as a freshman in college what I wanted to do. Got there, and then I had an internship at ESPN when it was the summer before my sophomore year.
Okay.
In Connecticut. And got to Connecticut and met a bunch of guys in they call it the International Security Department, who were former DSS agents. I had never heard what DSS was. It's Diplomatic Security Service. So these guys are people that worked in embassies,
okay,
all around the world. And when you become an embassy employee of any type, you have to work at least 16 years, and you go on 4 they call missions. And so it's like a really cool thing if you don't, I guess, have a family to take with you. And you get to go to 4 countries in 16 years. And then after that, you essentially get to pick where you would like to work. So it's a very cool thing. And they put you in some nice places. And
right.
So that was kind of my goal. Like I wanted to do that. Not a diplomatic security service, but to work in an embassy.
Okay.
A foreign service agent. So wanted to do that. And then ultimately it just didn't materialize. It was going to take a lot more time, like post-grad, than I wanted it to.
Sure.
So plan B, I was like, well, maybe law school. And the more I kind of like looked into it, I was like, no, I really think there are a ton of opportunities for me, even if I don't want to practice law in a courtroom, that, I could have. So that was when I started studying for the LSAT, and that's really when I knew.
Very cool. And so, when you were looking into law schools, you had what was your major again? I just read it.
International Security Studies.
International Security Studies. Okay, that's kind of a very random major to have. I get asked this question all the time. What should I major in if I want to go to law school?
Mm-hmm.
And so what is your take on that question?
Anything. So ultimately, the requirements to go to law school, what does it take to get into quote unquote a good law school? You need to have an undergraduate degree. You need to do well on the LSAT, and you need to have some good recommendations from personal and professional angles that you had been in your life. If you nail those three things, you're going to get in, period. The question is kind of twofold, because the first angle is, if you want to be a good lawyer, there are certain skills that you need. You probably need to speak well. You probably need to write well. And you need to be able to issue spot, to see a fact pattern, whether it's someone telling it to you or you're reading it, and be able to take all that info and go, okay, here's really the problem, and here's what I think the solution is. Mm. So if you want to be a trial attorney, I think any English major, any intensive writing major, a political science, those are degrees that kind of hone those skills a little bit, but there is not one that's going to prepare you exactly for law school. There are even, and I don't know what schools, I'm just saying, there are things called pre-law degrees. That's great. If you're dead set on law school when you're 18 years old, awesome. But if there's something you're more interested in undergraduate, take that. Sure. And it's not going to prepare you for the LSAT. So it's kind of like, I think just have a good undergraduate experience, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, I have a very similar answer when people ask me that. I tell them, first off, pick something you're interested in.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's so much harder to do well when you don't like what you're studying. Second to that, I say, find something that you enjoy and that requires you to write. Mm-hmm. Because if you can take information and you can boil it down and you can actually write, then that is a skill set that is surprisingly rare, mm-hmm. and feels like it's becoming even more rare. When I see somebody that can write, then I know that we have something we can work with.
Yeah.
And, the other thing I tell them is look at majors, like if they're up your alley, like history, like English, like philosophy, things where you have to take these really difficult concepts and boil them down and then be able to write on them or speak to them, because essentially that's what being a lawyer is.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of, all right, I've done these things. I've got my college degree, or I'm working on my college degree. I'm studying for the LSAT, or I've done really well on the LSAT, and I have these recommendations. What is it that people should be looking at as they're applying to law schools?
I think, just to back up a little bit, when it comes to the LSAT, now there are some law schools today that have that don't prioritize the LSAT as much as they used to, but by and large, 95%, if you do super well in the LSAT, you can go to where you want to go. That's just a rule. So that hasn't gone away as much as some law schools are looking to other parameters to judge a candidate.
Sure.
But that being said, once you have those things done, I think for me, the two things I would consider the most are, if you know, what do you want to do? And that's a general question, meaning, okay, I had a good friend in law school. His name is Ryan, and he was a nuclear subsystems engineer prior to law school.
So patent?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so this guy had a very specific reason why he was going to law school. So if you have that, good. But you may know, I think I want to be in a courtroom, or I definitely don't want to be in a courtroom. I want to, be writing contracts. I want to be a sports agent. If you have a general idea of what you want to do, that's the first thing to consider. And the second thing truly is going to be the culture at the school. And so speaking to the first one, you want to look, okay, if I want to do patent law, does the law school that I want to go to have a really good IP program? If that's the case, awesome. And so those are things that when you go through the admission process, when you go tour your school, they're going to advertise all of their kind of sub programs about what they're really good at. So that's the first thing. And then culture is the second one, because inherently law school is competitive. You're going to have a bunch of A+ kids that are going to come into a place where only 5% of them are getting A+. It's just how it is.
Yep.
And so you want it the least, in my opinion, least cutthroat as possible. So I had heard horror stories from other law schools in the Metroplex that they were cutting out pages of textbooks that they had sold to the next class, like crazy stuff like that. And I don't know if that's true, but the point is, like, if that's even plausible, it's kind of a nasty environment to be in. And so at Texas A&M, one thing I really was proud of there, it was competitive, but they did their best to foster a good environment where it was like, it's not that if I win, somebody else loses. We can all do well. And so I think if you mention that and you prioritize that, it's going to make your experience that much easier.
Yeah, I remember hearing those stories too. I think those stories have been around since law school was first invented. And I never experienced any of that stuff at Baylor. I think the law schools in general do a really good job of not pitting students against each other, but really, focusing on, look, you take care of you. Don't worry about everybody else.
Yeah.
You learn what you need to know, and you'll be successful. Doesn't matter what the other 50 people or 100 people or whatever in your class are doing. Just do what you need to do. On the kind of knowing what you need to know or knowing what you want to do front, I had so many friends who I started law school with who were dead set. They knew what they were going to do. One of them or several of them wanted to be trial lawyers.
Yeah.
A couple had zero interest in being trial lawyers. And at Baylor, we have the practice court program. So everybody graduates knowing how to be a trial lawyer and up on your feet, and you do the different things. And I can't tell you how many people that experience really changed, from the ones who thought they wanted to do it and then got involved in it and were like, this is awful. I hate this.
Yeah.
And the ones who had zero interest in it got up there and did really, really well and found something that they were passionate about. So I would caution anyone looking at law school to go in, even if you think you know what you want to do, have an open mind.
Absolutely.
Take some classes that you don't think you'll be interested in, because you'll be surprised. Like, one of my favorite classes in law school was negotiable instruments. That sounded terrible. I think I had to have it for an elective. And when I took it, it was a really interesting class.
Yeah.
So I would definitely tell everyone who's looking to law school, look at all those things that Christian talked about, and also, enter it with an open mind. I would also say, if you know that you want to practice in a specific state, I would give heavy weight to that state. Obviously, the bar exam has changed.
Yeah.
It's now the uniform bar exam, and is it every state?
I think there are 38 states. I want to say
38 states. I know Texas is one of them now.
Texas is one now.
So it's not that it's easier to get licensed in a particular state, but remember too, when you go to law school, you're making connections. Your professors have connections with the law firms throughout the state. Yeah. And so that is a huge advantage. I know, my evidence professors who got me my first job after my second, I was in my third year law school, and he asked me, he's like, hey, where are you going to be working at? And I said, I don't have a job yet. And he said, let me make a call. And I got an interview like a week later at this firm, and that's the firm that I ended up going to work for.
And I would add actually one thing to the answer of, if you want to go to law school and you have these parameters already set, what do you need to look for? I would say another thing too is, when I'm looking at metrics, I'm like Googling law schools. Where they rank is significantly less important than other things that you'll see on like the U.S. U.S. and World News Report, and those types of things. What you want to look at also is percentage of graduates that get employment upon graduating.
Yeah, that's big.
Bar passage rate.
Very big.
Right. So it's like those are things too where it's very practical. Okay, maybe this school is ranked 50th and not 25th, but they're putting 96% of their kids are passing the bar exam on their first try, and 90% of those are getting a job as soon as they graduate. And that's, I would hope, why you're going to law school is to get a job of some kind. So if that's the case, I think that's another really important thing to look at, where it's much less about the prestige and much more about like, you're going to focus, you're going to work hard, and is your school, does it have the resources to give you opportunities?
Absolutely, 100%. Okay, so you've taken the LSAT, you've gotten accepted into the law school, you've chosen the one for you. How do you prepare for law school?
Prior to your first class, I don't necessarily know if there's a way. That 1L year it's a one-of-a-kind experience in terms of like a culture shock. The only way it's less of a culture shock is maybe if you have lawyers in your family, or somebody close to you that's an attorney that can kind of prep you. But I think the one preparation that you need to have is you need to go into it knowing that even if you finish first in your class, it's gonna be hard. Mm-hmm. That first year is by far much harder than the next 2 years combined. That first year is really, really tough. So it's not one of those things you can go into where like, you're an undergrad and you're a engineering major and you're taking like a philosophy class, you're like, whatever, like I'll just do what I need to do. Like, it needs to be intense focus, and you need to know it's going to be difficult. And so that's, I just think really the mindset going into it is the most important thing.
Yeah, it really is. I know a lot of people who, and this really went for some of the people who didn't go straight from college into law school, but they actually had jobs first. Mm-hmm. They treated law school like a job.
As you should.
Yeah, they would get up and have their morning routine or whatever, come to the campus, study if they didn't have an early first class, and then they would go to the classes, and then they would study and kind of do their outlines after the class, organize their notes, study for the next class. And then at 5 or 6 o'clock, they would really be caught up for the next day and go home.
Yeah.
That is not how I did it by any stretch of the imagination. And, I think that would have been way more productive to do it that way.
Sure.
But ultimately, each individual is going to perform, according to how they do things best. But, if undergrad was easy for you, if you didn't have to work that hard, then be ready. Be ready.
Right.
Even if you're the smartest person to ever walk the earth, there is still just a ton to do.
Yeah.
And you got to be organized. You got to be able to read through just amazing amounts of material and be able to brief cases. That is like the first skill you learn is how to brief a case. And it is just a ton of work. So yeah, it's going to suck. But that doesn't mean that it has to be a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's super busy. You can still enjoy it. I've had a great time in law school.
Yeah.
I made some amazing friends that I'm still super close with today. And in terms of preparation, I think the mindset is really about the only thing that you can handle.
100%. There's no crash course that you can take the summer before you start.
There's no bar prep or law school prep class.
There's not.
Maybe we could set one of those up. That's an interesting idea. All right. So you get through that first semester, right? You're now acclimated. You understand what's going on. What is the next step that you would focus on?
By the time you get to the end of that first semester, there's going to be a particular pressure that's going to, in two ways, that's going to come upon every law student. So the first one is going to be you're going to have your first round of finals. And the second one is going to be GPAs are going to come out. And that's when kids start thinking about law review. They start thinking about journals. And that's where rankings start to be established. And it can be extremely demoralizing if you were like, I'm for sure going to be top 5% and be on law review, and you're not. And so I would caution students to say, when you're thinking about how you did after that first semester, if you recognize for yourself, hey, man, I was a little bit lazy. Okay, well then your second semester, why don't you fix that?
Yeah.
But even if you gave it all you had and you didn't end up where you thought, if that's going to be your mentality throughout law school and your professional career, you're going to do great, no matter where you ended up. So those types of things that, again, touch on prestige. And I'm not saying law review is not awesome. If you make that, that's fantastic. Like, you earned it and you deserve everything that comes with that. But even if you didn't, if you're working as hard as you can, and in the profession, not everybody's working as hard as they can.
No, not at all.
And so, like, if that's, you can honestly say to yourself, I did everything I could do, didn't end up where I wanted to. You will eventually, like, even if you don't graduate in the place you thought you would, because that kind of chatter about rankings and GPA is inevitable, and you're going to hear it. So it's one of those things I would say, if you work hard, it matters significantly less than you think it does in the long run.
And I will tell you this, I don't think I have ever asked anyone what their GPA was or what their class rank was in interviewing at our law firm.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, we haven't hired anybody out of law school, so the people that we've hired have had experience, and so the interview has been more based on that.
Right.
But even if you graduate with a mediocre GPA, after your first job, nobody's really going to care.
100%.
And so, you touched on finals being kind of the first real stressor. At Baylor, that's all we had. We didn't have tests along the way or quizzes or anything like that. It was just a final. And it was usually like a 3-hour sit down. Back then, you wrote out essays. You got maybe one question, maybe 2 or 3 questions, and they were all fact patterns. And you were just given a fact pattern.
That was largely my experience as well.
Yeah. And so there was no question at the end. It was just, here's the fact pattern, go spot all the issues.
Mm-hmm.
And to your previous point of being able to look through facts and spot issues, that's incredibly difficult because you don't take practice tests. We didn't.
Mm-mm.
And so to know how to write out an exam is almost an art form. How did you approach it when you sat down to take that very first law school exam?
I think the first thing I did is I found a core group. So I had 3 guys, Ryan, who's the engineer I talked about, Ivan and Cole. And these 3 guys were the dudes that I studied with for every final, for every issue we didn't understand, and ultimately for the bar exam. I still keep in touch with all of them. And I think that's the first thing is you need to figure out how it is that you learn. There are some people that learn best by themselves. And if that's you, that's great. I would just say, if you have a question, chances are somebody has the exact same question. So maybe try to work it out with them.
Yeah.
So kind of find, your common people that you can study with. And then secondly, it's take a breath before you go. And know that as awkward and first time as this experience is for you, it's the exact same for everybody else. And so again, if you feel like you've put in the prep that is required and you give it all you have, I think you let the chips fall where they may. And that's just kind of what it is.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point too. I had a study group as well. Jeff and Ryan were my cohorts, and we still keep in touch today as well. Even if you think you learn best on your own, it's a great way to study. Still, I would encourage everyone out there to find a study group. Mm-hmm. And here's why. The vast majority of stuff that you're doing in law school is not black and white. You're not memorizing facts. You're not memorizing cases. I guess there's some of that, although I don't ever remember having to memorize cases. It was mainly issue spotting. And you can be wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the greatest benefits of being in a study group is you're hearing things from other people about, well, hold on, I think this is actually this element right here, and you would have just never seen that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a massive, massive benefit, is to have that study group, at least, around finals. You don't have to study with them all the time, but have those people that you can go through different fact patterns with, because you can find fake fact patterns. I mean, on the internet now, I'm sure there's way more than what we had access to.
Yeah.
And probably with great explanations as to all the different issues in there too. But I think that's a really, really good point. Okay, so you get through that first year, everything's going great. At what point in time did you start thinking about, all right, who do I want to try to intern with or clerk for, or what area am I interested in that I want to pursue?
Yeah. So when I went into law school, what I thought I was interested in was immigration law, family-based immigration. And I was and still am interested in the field. But when it comes to actually engaging in that as a profession, a day-to-day thing, 40 hours plus a week doing that, I clerked at an immigration firm's my very first clerkship. And I realized it was probably too heavy for me to do. It's similar to criminal defense in the sense that like the stakes are up against you. It's you kind of go into the game in a losing position. Odds are against you, right? So I felt like if I was going to do that every day, I would be kind of desensitized to like human emotion and heartbreak. And I just felt like it was too much. So once I let go of that, it was, what do I want to do? And there always was the litigation component. So I felt like I would much rather be representing someone that may or may not end up in court versus being like just a contractual lawyer. And so I started actually after that with a PI firm in Arlington and got a lot of experience. And so I realized then, okay, I don't know if it's this industry, but it's definitely this practice area in terms of like being a litigator that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So that was kind of, you got to try some stuff and it's going to work or it's not. But then it's process of elimination. So it's still helpful, especially that first summer.
Sure. I was one of those who, when I went to law school, I knew exactly what I wanted to do because that was really my only experience with the law. I fell into that internship with a personal injury attorney and said, "Hey, yeah, I can do this." And in law school, nothing changed my mind. Got through practice court and really enjoyed that, and ended up going and working for that first firm, which was a products liability defense firm. I wanted to be on the plaintiff side, but the defense side hired me, so I went there.
Right.
But yeah, I think once you start to find some interesting things and you identify where your skill set is, because a lot of people want to be trial lawyers and they're just not very good at it. They don't have an innate skill set and they don't have the want to go develop it. Some people want to be trial lawyers and they find that their skill set is really in contracts or negotiations or something along those lines. And so I think if your passion and your skill set aligns, you're in a really good spot.
Yeah.
So, okay. You make it through year 3. Our year 3 was one of the hardest years at Baylor, but for most people it's not. For most people it's just kind of checking the box.
Yeah.
What do you do after you pass that or after you get that diploma and you walk across the stage and you have this massive exam staring you right in the face? So
you have to have a plan. And this is something that I really care about. I help law students, mostly from A&M, that are graduates, get through the process of bar prep. I'm going to mention a few companies, but it really doesn't matter which companies they are. But your plan, the first thing is your time. So in my case, I used Barbary, and it was a 12-week time frame. And what's important about that is certainly don't do less than the 12 weeks, but don't do more. If you graduate, I want to say I graduated like May 7th or something. And I think I started my bar prep maybe 2 weeks later. I didn't do anything related to school. I just chilled for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's what there's some kids that are like engaging in bar prep in like March. And I'm like, it's a gauntlet. It's not time yet.
Yeah.
Like these programs are really good. They're set up to be started and finished exactly when they tell you, assuming you do the work.
Yeah.
So I would think have a plan, have your bar prep company, whichever it is. And then I also think find a multiple choice exam software. The one I used was Adaptabar. And those two things, if you do all of the work in the amount of weeks that it prescribes you, you're going to be fine. And then also, even more so than the 1L year, this is a job.
100% agree
like
on
this
that.
is this you don't even get an opportunity like your second year of law school to maybe correct a couple of those issues. You get 12 weeks. So don't cut corners. Like it's not going to be fun. It's very not fun.
Very not fun.
Yeah. But again, go into it with the mentality like this is my job. I'm not going to talk to my mom that much. I'm like going to go home and probably sleep. But have a plan and know it's going to be hard.
And so how's the new bar exam split up? What does that look like? Is it still 2.5 days?
So it's 2 days. The main difference is going to be that there are more multiple choice questions and less essays. So again, that's why in my case, Adaptabar was a godsend because it felt like I really had almost seen the exact question multiple times on the exam. And to that point, it pulls actual bar exam questions from past exams. So it's not like hypothetical questions. It's maybe one from 2 years ago or 12 years ago, but you see a version of that on the real exam.
And for those of you out there who may have a preference towards multiple choice, you don't on the bar exam.
No.
It is the hardest multiple choice test you've ever taken in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I remember we didn't have any kind of software program, Adaptabar or anything like that when I was going through. We had to go, I remember I paid to go to, I don't remember what, is it the MBE? Is that what the multiple choice was? Mm-hmm. I paid, and several of us did, to basically sit there for over 3 days and take it 4 or 5 times. Mm-hmm. And by the 5th time you took it, you started saying, okay, all right, I'm going to be okay on this because you did start to see those little things. And they are asking such nuanced questions on classes that you may or may not have taken.
100%.
Because what a lot of people don't know is on the bar exam, it's open season.
Yeah.
If you took oil and gas, great. There may or may not be an oil and gas question on there. I didn't take it. And ours was the first bar exam in like 5 years that had a question on there. And so I was just relying on Barbary that I hoped that I had the right keywords in my essay.
Right.
But give me an essay any day over a multiple choice.
Right. So, and you'll also have, so at least in my experience, the first thing we did, the first half day was the MPTs, which is I think the easiest part of the bar exam. The MPTs is basically like a classic law school exam. You get facts, you get law, you write. And you get a lot of time versus the essays are more time pressured. And so using the softwares, kind of to your point, what's really cool about specifically Adaptabar is the algorithm is going to narrow down what you're bad at and feed you that down to like the subtopic. So,
oh wow,
yeah. So it's really good about filtering. Okay, what am I missing consistently, and what issue do I not spot? And then it tells you, hey, you're not seeing this. And so you go through that process, and eventually it'll give you a full MBE exam. So it times those. I want to say there's probably 5. And then when I was taking it, super worried, super nervous, stressed. And then by the time I was through like 4 exams, I was like, okay, well, my floor, the worst I did is good enough, most likely, to pass.
Yeah.
And so then you go into the actual exam and you go, okay, even if I do as bad as I can do, it's probably still good enough. So it's kind of like, you don't have to knock it out of the park. You just have to pass.
Yeah. I remember one of the scariest parts of taking the bar exam was after it was over. And, we all went out afterwards to celebrate.
Yep.
And then invariably somebody's like, hey, what did you put for this one?
Yep.
And no matter what the question is, somebody has a different answer than you. And when you hear that 2 or 3 times, you start getting really nervous and you just kind of want to go home and get sick.
Yeah.
And then here's the other thing. You don't find out your results for, let's see, I took it in July and I didn't find out until either end of October or early November.
Yeah, mine was October, same thing.
Yeah.
I actually do have a war story about this is a theme throughout all of law school. In my opinion, it would make me really upset when people would talk about exams as soon as we leave the classroom.
Yes.
Some people like it. Inevitably, like you said, it happened after the bar exam, and it happened specifically on 2 essays. So I didn't really take a specific family law class in law school. And there was a personal jurisdiction essay, and then there's a family law essay. And the first one was the family law one, or so I thought. And
oh no.
And because the fact pattern was essentially like there was, 2 divorcees and one had taken the kid across state lines, and it was asking like jurisdiction questions. But then I was like, no, it's for sure. It has to be a personal jurisdiction question because there's like all these words. And so like buzzwords, right?
Yeah.
So I write it exactly like that. Get to the last essay. It's a clear like diversity question. So now I know it was definitely family law. So I finish at the last essay and go back, and essentially I'm not even really solving the problem. I'm just writing things that I think will get me points.
Yeah.
And then
strategy.
Yeah. And then when we, start talking about it after, I realized, okay, there's like a 50-50 split of kids that thought it was this or that. So ultimately on a curved exam, it's a wash.
Yeah. And it could be a little bit of both.
Yeah.
A lot of times those professors will stick fact patterns in there that, draw your eye to different things. Mm-hmm. And then when you're going over, I always used to go over my exams with the professors afterwards and say, okay, what did I miss? Like
right.
where did I just completely swing and miss? If I found it and I just evaluated it other than how you would have, cool. Mm-hmm. But I saw it. What did I just flat out not see? And it was shocking how many things were in those questions that I just glazed over. Never in a million years would I have found them.
Definitely.
Okay. So you finally get through that. You take the bar exam. You don't know if you passed or not. And a lot of times jobs start on September 1st. So you start a job without knowing whether or not you passed the bar exam. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of an unspoken or spoken deal with a lot of firms of, hey, if you don't pass, then we got to let you go.
Right.
Because obviously we're paying you to be a lawyer here. And if you're not licensed, then you can't be a lawyer.
Correct.
So you always have that hanging over your head
mm-hmm.
Until the day that the bar exam scores drop on the internet. Mm-hmm. So when you started your first job, what was your mindset? How did you approach that?
I think the first thing I would say, just in terms of advice to people that are in that position, take a week after. Most likely, the job that you got was either one that you had been clerking for, and you're going to get at least some say-so in terms of when your start date is. If you take the exam July 31st, start August 10th. Like whatever it is, take a break after that exam.
You have to.
You have to.
You're going to be mentally destroyed.
Correct. And then for me, starting, my number one concern was not making the most money up front. It was, I need to do what I can to be mentored and to become the best practitioner early on that I can be. Because if ultimately I get 3 years in my career and I know I'm really good at what I'm doing, maybe I'm not making as much money as I wanted to. Maybe it's not the best fit for me. But I know that when I go to the next place, I've got something to offer.
Yeah.
I've really focused on being as good as I can and listening to the advice of people smarter than me and older than me. And so that was my mentality. And I'll pray that I pass. Like, that was it.
Yeah. I think the number one word I would give any new attorney starting their first job is humility. Mm-hmm. You have graduated law school. That's fantastic. That's an amazing accomplishment.
Right.
You've sat for and taken the bar exam. Hopefully you passed. That'll be a massive accomplishment as well. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the day-to-day of practicing law, your paralegal will know more than you.
100%.
Your legal secretary will know more than you.
Right.
Because you don't know what you're doing in the day-to-day. You can talk theory all you want, but you can't bill clients for theory, and you can't practice law just based on theory.
Right.
And so when you step into that office the first day, I always tell people, know that you probably know the least about what's going on as anybody else there.
Right.
Everybody included.
And to that point, like, I'll get to reputation in a second, but when you start, the difference between you as an attorney from the day that you pass the bar and the day before is nothing. There's no difference.
Zero.
You simply have a qualification, and congrats. But you have to go in knowing, I mean, I remember the first summary judgment that I gave the partner at the firm. It might as well have been bleeding red. But the point was, first of all, I knew that was going to happen. But secondly, the next one bled a little less. And it's because you can't get like self-conscious that, God, I'm a bad lawyer. No, you're not.
No.
You're a baby.
Yep.
That is what it is. And so I think that mentality is huge. And then two, reputation. I mix this up when I say it, but there's a reason I say it this way. In this industry, it is easy to get your reputation and hard to lose it. Usually you would flip those.
Right.
The reason I mean it that way is you go in front of a judge and you're not prepared 2 or 3 times, they will remember you. And it is going to be so hard for you to flip their mentality. Same thing. If you screw around with your first job and there's an influential partner there and people start calling, like, hey, how is this guy? It's going to stick. And so if your mentality is to be humble and just to learn, that is going to last your entire career if you do that from day one. It's
Absolutely.
huge.
And the other thing I always tell new lawyers too is, hey, ask questions. Ask questions.
Always.
If you don't understand why we do something or why we made a certain decision or why we bled all over your paper, go ask. I used to drive one of the first partners I worked with nuts because she would give me a paper back. It'd be red all over it. And I'd go make the corrections that I knew and I'd highlight the ones that I didn't. And then I'd go sit in her office and make her explain them all to me because I didn't want to make those same mistakes again.
Right.
And while it was tedious for her at first, I'm sure, it was way less tedious when I wasn't making the same mistakes over and over and over.
Exactly.
And you are going to screw things up.
Yeah.
You just have to accept that. You will screw things up, and some of them are going to be very, very painful, and you're probably going to get yelled at.
Yeah.
But know that is a part of the process. And I always tell people, hey, embrace it when you screw up because that's a tuition payment. Learn from it, though. If you don't learn from it, then it's a wasted mistake.
Right.
So, Christian, we are out of time.
Okay.
That flew by.
One more thing.
Yeah, go for it, man.
One more thing. So I tell this to new lawyers specifically. You've passed, you have a job. In the scenario where, you're asking questions and your boss is extremely rude to you, or you work in a toxic environment, or you work too much and you don't have time for your family, quit. I really mean it. And I understand logistically, you got a mortgage, you got rent, you got student loans, you got kids. I totally get it. But if, again, that mentality that you've had, I'm working as hard as I can, it's going to work out.
Yep.
And you're going to be at that job just to pay your mortgage for 2 years. 2 is going to turn into 10. And then you're going to be just like that person you don't like. And so my advice is if you're early on, you're in a year or 2 of your career and you are not satisfied, take a shot and quit. And if your mentality is right, somehow, some way, you will find the right place. And that's like, they use the term golden handcuffs. It's so real.
Yeah.
Like, get out of that as early as possible if you're not where you think you need to be.
Yeah. And, I think the law has a reputation of being a place where people, especially young lawyers, are just chastised and made to work these crazy hours. And I'm here to tell you that's not how it has to be. You know, I think the culture at our firm is amazing. I think we have a teaching firm. We don't work crazy hours. You know, we put in the time when we have to put in the time. We get our stuff done. And like, to me, that's how it should be. And that's one of the things that Rocio and I set out to create, was a law firm that we both really wanted to work with. Right. Because we've been in other circumstances where it was more toxic, and, you know, we didn't want that. And so, yeah, totally agree. If that's just not how your career has to be, nor should be. Right. So, all right, Christian, you're a reader. Give me your top 3 favorite books.
Okay. The Devil in the White City is one.
Read that a long time ago. Got it in an airport.
That's a great one. Problem of Pain, C.S. Lewis. It's probably going to be another C.S. Lewis book. And Screw Tape.
Screw Tape? Yeah. Figured you'd go with Screw Tape.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Christian, thank you so much for being here. And thank you to everyone for joining us on another episode of the Driven Crowd Podcast. We'll see you next time.